time for another round of brandy. Candid conversations over cocktails about all things brand with your hosts, Reilly Newman and Scott Saunders, the brand developers behind Motif Brands.
And welcome back.
Welcome.
This is a brand new episode of Brandy as we start the brand new quarter of 2026.
Q3. God,
Quarter 3.
Years flying by.
Already. So as July kind of kicks off, we had the holidays with 4th of July, big shebang, and a lot of companies maybe kind of going into this quarter. I've always seen that they start thinking about the holidays. You're starting to see that already. You're seeing Halloween stuff roll out. You saw Christmas stuff coming out.
I got an Instagram feed. In my Instagram feed, it was for Muppets Christmas ornaments, like Hallmark, I think, something that came on. I'm like, oh, I got all excited because I'm a huge, yeah.
But you're starting to get these things. People are trying to plan ahead. It makes sense. And I feel like sometimes around this time, you'll get it where, okay, it's Q3. Let's start planning a rebrand, or we need to start shaking things up, or we need to start pumping to the end of the year and get these things done.
You're looking back on quarter 1 and 2 and trying to assess. And
it's similar to kind of the annual review we sometimes see businesses go through with the new year, where they get this pressure of, okay, it's the new year. We need to shake everything up and start from scratch. And I think this episode we're going to kind of focus on, okay, rebrands are important. They can be very, very valuable, but like we've said before, rebranding...
the crux of our business.
It's what we do.
It's what we do.
And
without them.
But a improper rebrand is something that could cause a lot of pain for the business. Kind of like we've seen with Cracker Barrel, Jaguar, and some of these other flops that have happened where they've rebranded out of boredom or kind of being desperate, or not just focus. And so even in this, if you're familiar with the term of signal and the noise, a good leader, a good founder, or a good marketer can separate the signal from the noise. Is that just like we've seen with the internet, with marketing as a whole, there is a lot of noise. And so finding the signal, finding the right kind of tune to kind of have for the business and for the brand, that's really the hitting the nail on the head.
And what do you mean, like, define signal, like when you're saying signals?
So a signal, like with anything, it's like, okay, if like on the radio or on, you'd tune to the frequency and finding that. And so a signal for a business could be going, okay, what is our true customer? What do people actually appreciate us and want to buy from us? What do they love that we do? And focusing on that and not listening to the noise that could be going,
stuff.
Oh, we need to start selling this, or we need to start doing this, or our competitor started doing this. So we need to do this.
So
right?
is it would you say it's your own signal? What is your signal? What is your customer's signal? Or that signals, that sweet spot, what's the noise from everything else for a small business to be identifying it when you're referring to signal?
I think it's one and the same, where you have this symbiotic relationship between the business and the market, where the audience, the right audience, appreciates what the business provides, and they're willing to pay for that and even pay a premium for that, while then the business is providing value and they're not taking advantage of the audience, but they are providing value to the utmost of what they are appreciated for, right? There's a mutual,
it's finding your sweet spot.
It's like again, In-N-Out, where In-N-Out's not going to start selling chicken because they very well could start doing chicken sandwiches, and there's probably a decent market for that.
And they've probably tossed that idea around multiple times.
Yeah, and they just have stuck to, no, the signal amongst all the noise in fast food. The signal for In-N-Out is burgers and fries. So it's very interesting, especially when the business actually does find what their signal is. And again, even like we've talked about Apple before and some of these cliches, is like Apple had a ton of products in the earlier years. And then Steve Jobs came back and went, nope, and started just cutting them all, right? And then focusing everything down. And it's like you see that with service businesses where they just keep adding services, trying to serve all this huge broad swath of everything they could do. You see it with restaurants where their menus just keeps growing and growing and growing. They lose track of who they are. They lose track of the signal because of the noise. So with this new quarter, we need to get our heads out of the noise and kind of really either fine tune and find that tuning again of what the signal truly is and focus in on that and use it as a moment of going, okay, yes, some reflection on Q1, Q2, how's the market doing, how's your business doing, but also then going, okay, what is this signal that we need to kind of realign ourselves with?
And I think there's a difference too, and what we're talking about too is a lot of times when you think of rebranding, it's like a major overhaul. It's a huge shift. And most people think if you say rebrand, the first thing that comes to mind is the logo. We're going to redo the logo, and sometimes it can be a completely different logo, or sometimes it's just a minor little tweak. But the same thing with on that scale is your brand as well. Is that in doing that, sometimes it's a matter of just, like you said, tuning into that signal is almost just turning the dial just a couple clicks more to the left or right to dial that in, not having to completely re-scramble and find a completely different signal. It's that idea that you can, what we're talking about isn't just full overhaul, complete overhaul rebrands. It's refining. And sometimes these adjustments are well to be made halfway during the year to get you dialed in. But what we're talking about is like more, I think, a lot of times what we end up seeing is that mid-year hump, right, of businesses deciding to rebrand more than they need to in many cases, and just doing it either out of boredom, out of, well, everyone else seems to be doing it, so we should do it too, mentality.
Yeah, and so we've mentioned the term like reframing before, and to me, reframing is a great word just because, like with a picture, you can change the whole aesthetic of a picture just by changing the frame. And so if you're offering, or maybe your brand does need to be refined or kind of adapted to how things have changed or how the market winds have changed or whatever it is, you can really start by reframing, and that can be through messaging or even just imagery, things like that, where you're starting to alter the perception slightly. This isn't reframing the entire brand and its positioning. This isn't a complete overhaul, like Scott was saying. That would be, let's leave that for rebrand. And like also keeping in mind is that I just feel like the same goes for the word like brand and branding and the word rebrand, is that those words have been so kind of washed and diluted that now everything is kind of like, oh, they rebranded. And it's like, no, they did a packaging update, right? Or like
one product.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's been kind of like, no, that's not, I wouldn't call that a rebrand. A rebrand really, to me, gets to the crux of it, and there's a positioning that goes along with it that is, yes, it's refining the signal, but it could actually be changing the channel as well, if we're sticking with like the radio metaphor.
And that's usually more of a refinement. It's more like, you're fishing a big pool, and then once you find what bait works with what majority of the pond you want to be pulling from, that's when you're kind of rebrand, because you get more refined. That's what we talk about, having clarity of brand, is that you're able to steer and hone the brand to really connect with a specific audience. And a lot of times with so many brands, they're trying to reach everybody. They're trying to speak to everybody. And when they do that, they're not going to speak to anybody. Because they're not, you need to know who you really want to go after, and then speak their language, speak directly to them.
Yeah, and I feel like the confusion does come from, because again, separating the signal from the noise is difficult. It's not easy. And you get heat from marketers, from people on your team going, the brand's like bored, it's tired, the sales are in a slump, or maybe if we just rebrand, that will reignite everything. And it's like, no, that could actually do a lot more harm than anything if you just start reinventing things mid-year and trying to just throw everything at it to fix it, when going, no, there actually may be some nuanced reframing you could do that could improve sales, get things fired up again for going into the last stretch of the year. Or what we're going to get into is kind of the deficits that you may be facing that actually do make a rebrand viable. It could actually go, no, actually, this could be a good chance to rebrand, and you actually are in a good position to rebrand. And I think that's what a lot of our clients, sometimes there's undervalued like assets they're sitting on, or things they aren't leveraging because they've got distracted by the noise, and they've kind of lost track of, again, who they are or what the signal is. And like, again, going back to the In-N-Out example, it'd be like if In-N-Out was selling chicken, they're selling all this other stuff and Beyond Meat and everything else that the market has been wanting or not wanting, and they've lost track of who they are. They've lost track of the signal, when it's like, wait a second, if you just focused on burgers, you would be much more profitable, And you would have a clear beacon for your audience to recognize you as. They would know that you are just burgers. So if you want burgers, you go to the burger place. And there's a lot of benefits in that for the audience, but also for the business as a whole. So the brand deficits, like we've talked about on our scorecard before, the four kind of, like from a high elevation, you have relevance, value deficit, a transfer deficit, and an evolution, where essentially we're going to walk through each of these and kind of give some brief examples and just chat about them, where these are kind of main areas or kind of realms where business, you could feel it, where the business is missing on these parts. There's a gap between where the business currently is and where the business is experiencing maybe some friction or some kind of just confusion in the market, or where it's suffering, and that could be in like pricing power and things like that. So we could start with the overall just kind of relevance brand deficit. And this really does come down to, when you think of relevance, it's like, okay, the business could be actually losing the deals it should be getting. And so why would that be happening? Why would your business, if you are the business that sells X or Y and you're losing deals, it could be from the lack of relevance where the audience isn't actually connecting you to that solution. And that's a huge problem, because if you are if you've blurred the lines so much by listening to the noise, then you've kind of put yourself in this gray area where the audience isn't able to actually connect you to what they're trying to solve. And you see this all the time when brands are just too, like we talked about blanding before, where it's like it just becomes so bland where the audience has nothing to actually kind of latch onto and go, oh, this brand equals this.
Yeah.
And a good, recent example of this, or actually not recent, it's just a hot topic recently, is SpaceX and the crazy advancements the company has made in space technology. So before SpaceX, NASA would rely on essentially Boeing and Lockheed, and there's a couple other ones, but Boeing and Lockheed created this United Launch Alliance. And so they were essentially a monopoly on the launching industry, because it's not just NASA sending up astronauts to space, but the whole launching industry is essentially, you have these rockets going up and releasing satellites and stuff like that. So there was a whole industry, a very expensive industry, that was essentially monopolized by Boeing and Lockheed. They had a lot of contracts with the NASA as well, and internationally they had contracts. And so SpaceX comes along and they go, oh, I bet we could do this cheaper and do it more efficiently, and spent years and years and years refining the process. And finally they accomplished that. So now SpaceX comes along with a different ambition and a different price point in the market that was completely monopolized by these giants that are, they kind of got to a point where they didn't care as much, because they wrote off even what SpaceX is doing as, quote, impossible.
Well, they align too on the ambition that NASA has always represented to culture, to investors, to everything. NASA is like always, like when I think of Boeing, I don't think of innovation. When I think of NASA, I think of innovation, putting a man on the moon or whatever they're set out to do next. It's like, that's where it seems like, and so for them aligning themselves, the brand of SpaceX aligning with that, I think helped them win that war too.
And I think now NASA is at threat of SpaceX, because SpaceX is way more effective at launches, and now it's the technology. It's the progressive player in the field of going, oh wow, they're actually changing the entire industry. So it's really interesting is that the relevance, right, of SpaceX is now way more aligned with these companies that do need to launch satellites, and these companies or governments that do need to launch rockets, where yes, they're relevant on price point. SpaceX does it way cheaper than what some of these rocket companies were charging. I think it's like a tenth of the price. It's like what they're able to do is really phenomenal. And then now also the perception of SpaceX is future forward. It's got all these really great things that I feel like NASA used to represent, but NASA has since lost that, and now you have SpaceX leading this. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, but I think that's a good relevance kind of example on a huge, massive, these contracts are like...
You're like, I'm not Boeing, and I'm not SpaceX.
I don't have $1 billion contracts.
My business is not on that scale, guys. But we understand that. We're just using it, just broad stroke example. But moving on, I think the next one is interesting for me, because I think particularly affects service businesses, right? And that's value. That's the idea that you're getting more for what you're paid for, and that is really about how you're positioning yourself to your audience. A lot of times when you just have service businesses, they're billing naturally a lot of times by the hour, right? And so it's like, oh well, I need this, and realizing that even just even how their service and their brand communicates to the customer is maybe it's less about how you get there, like hourly rate and parts and all this itemized things, and it's more of the end result, the solution that the potential customer is looking for, and how does your brand convey that more in terms of than just you pay this is what you get.
Yeah. And that comes down to really a lot of these service businesses and products will get so focused on the inputs. Oh, we're putting this much into it. I put in this many hours, or we put in this many mechanisms or whatever. And then they will make up to the next level where they focus on the outcomes and go, oh, this is the end product, when what they should be focusing on is the end result. Like Scott said, is like the result is what matters, because when someone hires you, that's what they're focused on trying to achieve. They're trying to achieve something. And so service businesses, if the brand's not portraying that either visually or in messaging of going, hey, yeah, we hear where you're at and we're trying to help you get to this next level or help you achieve this certain goal. And they're just talking about, oh, we can, whatever, put in this many hours.
We install these at this price.
Yeah. And it just, they almost cannibalize themselves because they're commoditizing their own efforts in that way versus like, again, like a lot of clients that we've worked with, you wouldn't believe in conversation where they're explaining to me their process, because I always have them, okay, explain to me the business from the inside out so I understand everything about it. And there will be so many times where there's something where I'm like, wait, they explain a very methodical process. And I'm like, wait, do your customers know that you do that, or your clients know that you do that? And they're like, no, we just do it for them. And it's like they have a ton of value that they're packing in, and then the client knows nothing about it. It has nothing. It's never expressed to them in any way by the brand or by the method or anything like that. And so even that alone, just bringing awareness to something is what can help the brand actually stand out from the audience or from the competition, and actually become more valuable to the audience, where then they're going to go, oh, wow, I appreciate that. And I want to, most of the time, they want to pay more for that.
Right. But only do that if in other words, it's not a matter like, oh, well, get very detailed in explaining your service to your customers, because if every one of you on the block that provides that service does the same thing, then it's not distinctive. It's like if you're bringing something to the table that the other guys aren't, that's the thing to be bringing up. That's the thing to make the audience aware, is that you're getting this, but you're getting so much more value because of this, and this.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's distinctive from someone else. If you don't have any distinctions, then you've got a bigger brand issue, because that's part of the thing about having a good, successful brand, is that there is something that makes you distinctive, that makes you different than the other guys. Either your approach, how you do it, how you serve it, how you bring it to them, how, whatever it is, how they're engaged with every time they engage with the brand, or talk to the human components of your brand.
Yeah.
It's all those things.
Somehow this connects back to Steve Jobs and what he did with kind of changing the value from whatever megabytes at the moment or at that time to songs, is that he reframed it just with words and went, 1,000 songs in your pocket. And that completely changed the perception of value of the audience from whatever megabytes, because it wasn't even a gig, right? It was megabytes from, storage, and people kind of understanding that, and maybe how that translates to songs, to directly going, no, that's 1,000 songs in your pocket. And there's that value, right? So he focused on that result and what that could mean to someone. I'm going, oh wow, 1,000 songs in my pocket, right? Then that's the romanticizing of it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of benefits to be done to brands to help with that. So even if you are struggling on sales or even like pricing power and profitability, usually this can be part of that as well, as that you're kind of putting a ceiling on yourself for no good reason at all.
Yeah.
The next one is going to be the transfer deficit of a brand. And this can be actually like transferring from one market category to another, or a product extension, or even geographical. So even if a restaurant's going, okay, we're thriving in this one city or this region, and we're trying to expand to this other region or city, how beyond the reputation being able to kind of transplant the brand, how is the brand going to be able to make that jump?
Yeah. Or even, and there's ways that can be successful and there's ways that can fail. Something that comes to mind is like just thinking about like Ferrari trying to enter the EV market and how it's kind of not really being well received. That's where an issue of again, like you said, either a physical transfer of a store or opening up multiple locations. Your brand might need a little nudge. If you've done well in one location, that doesn't mean, hey, we're just going to open up a second one. It's going to do equally. There's no more extra effort the brand needs to do. And I think that's what we're describing is those areas where you're introducing yourself at the party as a new person. It's a party that either it's a different location, they've never heard your restaurant, or it's one of those things of you've got a new service. So therefore you are entering a new room where the party's at, new crowd of people. As a brand personality, you're walking in and saying, hi, we now do this too.
Yeah. And I feel like part of this is that you're changing context, because just like Ferrari going into EV, it's a totally redefinition of the meaning that someone's associating with the brand, going, wait a second, now you're doing EV. And then same thing happens when you change geographical context, where the brand's now popping up in this town and you're expecting everyone to accept you just like they did in your previous town or in your hometown. And then you're starting from ground zero, where you're going to have to re-explain everything, and you're in a completely different environment where they're going, wait, who are you? Why are you here? What do you sell? And so it's completely different, and the brand can help kind of nudge those things along. A good flop was when Liquid Death tried to go to the European market, and they just expected the European market to accept, canned tap water in a very metal theme to be accepted like it was here in the States. And it just didn't take, and it was rejected by the market. And so they actually canceled all their international distribution and manufacturing and then just focus on the United States. But I think this is also, they learned their lesson the hard way, but I think it brought them to focusing on the signal over the noise of going, no, we don't need to behave like other, beverages where we go international and we're selling everywhere, but no, just focus on America, focus on the United States. And since then they've expanded into colas and all kinds of stuff. So I think they're just expanding their brand within the American population and probably benefiting from that by focusing. The next final kind of deficit, the last, this one is kind of the big one of them, where you have this evolution where the business has adapted. Maybe it's, when it's changed generations, and now the new generation's wanting to upgrade things, move things forward, and be progressive, or you've been keeping your systems updated and you're keep packing in value into the business, but the brand hasn't kept up. So the brand has just stayed the same, and now it's starting to look outdated, or it's not fully reflecting how much you've been keeping the business kind of evolving over time. And that can harm a lot of your efforts that you're putting into it.
And you see this a lot of times with brands. I think those are the ones, like when I think of the ones that as businesses start to slowly change and modify and modernize and whatever it is, a lot of times the adjustments they make visually to signal change is very subtle. It's like in small little increments, kind of like the small little increments they're making in a business. It's not this massive giant leap. And I think those are the ones that are the most successful, because it allows and you see this with a lot of bigger companies or corporations, where might come out and they've announced a rebrand, but you look and go, I can barely notice a difference. Oh, the S has a little rounder corner, or something's different. There might be a slight angle to the lettering, or something that is so minor that a designer would pick up the difference. Most people wouldn't, but in a sense, they are signaling, because over time, if they go, look where we've come as a company in the last 10 years, and look where we've come as a brand, and you might be seeing all these little subtle changes that go along with it, but you don't notice them in real time because they're subtle enough, but it does have an effect. We talk about even subtle things like, font choices that convey certain personalities, color, even doing a slightly warmer version of your color or cooler version of your color can have an emotional effect, because color affects the psyche. So in a sense, there's ways you can fine tune your signal to have it reflect subtle changes your brand might be making over time. But this deficit of evolution is where it's more like it is outdated. It does not feel like it's still been doing things the way it's been doing the last 5-6 years, when a lot has happened in the way we do business and shop and engage with brands over the last 5 or 6 years. So that's kind of what we're talking about, right?
Yeah. And a good example that I've recently encountered is Olive Garden. And Olive Garden, within the last like 2 or 3 years, they've been really adapting to the market, to the changes. They've been playing with portion sizes and stuff like that. And I've taken my family there several times now, and we've had really good experience, and the food's been great, and it's just been awesome through and through. But to me, it's like the brand's still, they did that they did that one rebrand that was like 5 or 7 years ago or something, but it still just feels like, oh, you're expecting this antiquated sit-down restaurant experience. But to me, it's like, man, Olive Garden, that's such a good place where they are at the crux of, or the kind of the crossroads of theme and value of delivering a really great experience for people who are wanting a good meal. And I feel like that if they did actually a nice refresh or something to really show that new chapter that they're in, they would really improve things. Like they had increased sales and stuff last year, and they're really pushing hard. So I think that they're going to be something that plays out nicely, and they could probably learn something from like what Starbucks has been doing in the last year or so. Even now, Starbucks is pushing more like energy drink. Starbucks pushing more like the protein, and they've been updating a lot of stuff. But if you looked at the identity, is that Starbucks changed the name from, it was just Starbucks, and then they were going back to the coffee company and doing all things like that. And everything from the type treatment to the actual like attire that the employees wear and stuff, or the baristas, it all has a certain vibe to it. And even I saw they just came out with these gift cards, and they look like very like textured paper, and they look like they're written with Sharpie, so it looks like
oh, that's fun.
And it looked great. Like I was like, oh my gosh, it looks so. And they're using this Sharpie effect on all they have like electronic displays now, but they're using Sharpie on it, and it looks really cool what they're doing. But like Scott was saying, is that they are showing that they have been updating and refining their business by not fully divorcing themselves from what Starbucks was 2 or 3 years ago, but kind of evolving the brand so that the customer feels kind of like intrigue. And I think also then that reflection of going, oh, something is new here, something is different. I think Starbucks is going to push harder into the energy drink thing, because if you think about it, Starbucks has been in the energy drink industry with
who
caffeine.
Doesn't take the cans of the double shots on a road trip, when you're like driving, you're like, oh, those are easy to drop, pound 2 of those when I need it,
Now they have a new one I just noticed when I was in there, and it has vitamin B and caffeine. So they're pushing that, which that's essentially what Celsius and stuff is. I'm like, oh my gosh.
That's a good example too, because I feel like with Starbucks too, it's kind of like it's like one component of their sub set of communications as a brand to the customer. It's not like, oh, well, they're changing their logo.
Yeah.
Or refining the upper echelon components of the brand. It's a lot of times more subsystems of communication.
Yeah,
color palettes, imagery, font choices, things that they're consistent about, and that's what I love. That encapsulates one of our 3 C's that we call for a successful brand, and that's consistency, along with clarity and creativity. But consistency is that they're applying, like in this case, that Sharpie motif is done woven through various components, so that it is intentional, and it's not just a one-off, because then it would kind of fall flat.
Yeah.
And not be as effective in signaling something to the audience.
Yeah. And I feel like because the CEO from Chipotle came over to Starbucks to rescue the brand, and he essentially was like, okay, we're bringing back the Sharpie on the cup thing, no more of the tags, we're going to start. And honestly, every time I've gone to Starbucks, they've written on my cup. Like they've really enforced that. And
you still give them fake names, don't you?
Yeah.
They're humorous. Yeah.
I still give them fake names. But it's the same thing that Chipotle did with foil. I was like, I've always loved and appreciated how Chipotle made foil cool. Like they used it, and it became like the icon of the burrito. They made gift cards that looked like the burrito all wrapped up or swaddled in foil. And
I always liked the writing on their bags. I always thought that was fun. Like their bags are covered with almost like little
all the different words, all the
words and little little drawings and things. But it's like that to me is like super fun.
I was like, and they did such a good job, because they've Starbucks has now adopted pretty much that playbook. But I feel like the way Starbucks is doing it is, like you said, it's in all these little micro moments of this experience, and they're always pivoting it and changing it, and it keeps growing. I'm like, they're doing a great job. I think they're going to, I don't know, at the end of this year probably be much further ahead. But So these are like the 4 brand deficits. Again, it's like the relevance deficit, value, transfer, and evolution. And so if you want to explore these further, we actually have a scorecard or kind of little quiz that you can take and see how you align on these. And it'll kind of grade you on each of them. It's a free quiz. We don't collect any information or anything like that. But I can put the link in the show notes. And essentially, it's like if you're able to go through these and feel really good about them, or your score might not be so great, then that's going to be kind of indication of where you are and going, okay, maybe a rebrand does make sense. Maybe that is a healthy decision in this. It's almost like a blood work test of going, okay, how's your blood looking on these different things? And rather than getting that rebrand itch just because you're in the third quarter, but going, okay, this many months left in the year. We got holidays going to be coming in soon. Is this a time to reconsider things, or is it a time to readapt or maybe adjust things? Like Starbucks of going, okay, what are these micro little moments where we can help refine the brand and adapt things, because the market is changing. It's always changing. And if you're not, like you're going to end up dead in the water.
Well, I think I feel like this was a masterclass podcast episode. It's like on to the next point, the next slide,
Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.
But yeah, the bottom line, it's retooling your brand, tweaking it, fine tuning back into that signal, that the strongest signal you can have to connect with your audience. That's important. But just make sure what you're doing it makes sense. There's strategy and intentionality in what you're doing. You're not just mirroring what everyone else is doing blindly. And you're not jumping on a bandwagon, and you are doing it for the right reasons. But there's always a place, because your brand deserves to be at its best at all times.
Yes.
Well, until next week, cheers.
Cheers.